but it's always about following the money. Once you figure out how the money flows, you'll know what the case looks like, right? And that may take a long time, and that's hard. All these multiple accounts, multiple transactions, wire transfers, and assets being moved around and purchasing through shell companies. I love the complexity of it, but I also love that you could look at math and help you figure out through these credits and debits what the story was, right? Because no matter what that crime is, someone's got to get paid for it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the future of GovCon. This is a weekly podcast that we put together to bring together experts from across the industry and look at what's happening today and how it's going to impact the future of our industry. I'm Jake Frazer. I'm the owner and CEO of Precision Talent Solutions. In leading one of the industry's top executive search firms, I get to talk to influencers every day. C-suite executives, board members, growth leaders, top government officials, military flag officers. And on this podcast, what we're doing is we're bringing in these experts from AI, from space, from medical, from logistics, from engineering. And we're sitting down and talking about what's happening in their specific area of the industry and how it will impact the future. So pour a cup of coffee and let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jake with PTS. Welcome back for another episode of the Future of GovCon podcast, where we bring in experts from all the different slices across the industry to talk about what's going on now and what's shaping the future of our industry. I love it. We got a great guest today, McEachern, who is coming to us from the greater DC area. Ren has an incredible story, incredible career, 2 decades in the FBI, which in itself is worth a podcast. But he's spent the last 8 years or so on the industry side, tackling the challenges of everything from cyber security, crypto security, tracking illicit funds. And he brings a great perspective from the agency, but also as an industry leader and a CEO. So, Ren, thanks a lot for coming on today.
Jake, thanks for the invite. Real pleasure. Love what you guys are doing. I love the space you're thinking about and thinking about the future. It's such an important thing. And looking forward to the discussion. Thanks again.
So Ren came to us kind of via Andy McWilliams on my team and also Adam Lowry, a mutual friend over there at Nexus. So good people know good people. So it's he's fully vetted, folks. He's fully vetted. So let's get going. Before we get into the meat, talking about technology in the future, let's talk a little bit about Ren and how you grew up, what helped shape you in your formative years.
Yeah, no, I think it's helpful. I grew up in a place called Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is quite an unusual place to grow up as a kid, but fascinating. First on every level you can imagine, just outside of Boston. Harvard's there, MIT's there. My parents are from Connecticut and Maine, so I'm not from Boston, but I grew up in Boston. I don't have my accent. I don't talk.
I heard it.
Is and driving cars around. But I grew up in the city. It's a great place, but I think the big takeaway for me when I think about Boston is, number one, it makes everybody fanatical about sports. And so you're very involved in kind of what's going on in the community. But it's also very political. And so everybody's very involved in kind of what's happening in the news and paying attention to different issues coming. It's not a place for people to be sleepy about issues. And so as a young guy growing up in that area, you're always kind of tuned in, and a lot of people are tuned in as well. And so I think that really began my world of curiosity, right? And I think that's such an important way to think about it. And I got exposed to so many things, and that ultimately led me to really thinking about a law enforcement career, seeing so much police activity and just liking the excitement, and maybe a slight hint of watching this show called Chips, which is about the California Highway Patrol. You punch in the yellow, right? These little things that occur in your life that strangely sometimes influence you.
So you're of the same age that you grew up in the whole Larry Bird, Kevin McHale era, Danny Ainge, right?
I have a Polaroid of me getting my Larry Bird poster signed by Larry Bird.
Oh my God.
I mean, yeah, I've been so lucky. All the Bostonians have been lucky. We've seen all these amazing athletes and teams we have a wealth of championships that no one wants to use.
Okay, enough of that. Enough of that. Let's talk about that. No, I grew up. It was back in the day. You either like the Lakers or the Celtics. You had to pick a side. Before Jordan came along, back when Kevin McHale was the sixth man, right? And that was some great basketball.
It was great, and I was very fortunate, and that city is, we love to get fired up about stuff, and so it's a great place to grow up. But now it's too cold for me. I prefer to be a little further south. But
And Cambridge must have been a pretty rich gene pool, right? A lot of academics, smart people swirling around. Like, talk about growing up, high school. Were you an athlete? Were you a good student?
great question. When I was there, starting in the '70s, it was not a place of wealth. There's middle class and everything else. As I got older into my teenage years, it really became quite different. It was either very high class, big money, and low class, and middle class got pushed out, got very expensive. But so that was also kind of an interesting place. There were incubators popping up, and 128, which is the beltway around. There's a lot of different technologies coming out. So it was an interesting time to be there in the '80s and '90s. But I went to high school and was a hockey player. I was captain of my hockey team. I was not a great hockey player, but I had a lot of leadership skills, allegedly.
There you go.
And I just loved that sport, and I love playing sports. And I even got talked into doing 2 musicals my senior year by one of my best friends. And so I've dabbled in theater, right? I mean, such a
What were the musicals?
Yeah,
I was in
that's
I
right.
was Linus and I was Linus in the You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So you got to top that.
Yeah, so I mean, Jake, I was in Guys and Dolls and Kaniki and Grease, and so like
You're Kadicki.
I know, I look like Shrek, but somehow I was Kaniki. But yeah, it was great, and the schools are excellent there, and it was just it's very competitive. A lot of the kids are looking to go to 4-year schools, as I did, and really had a great experience. I had great parents, and I'm one of 4, so big family, and just really
Did a lot of kids you grow up with, did they go to Amherst? Was that a thing, or what took you there? What was the
there were the Amherst kids. The really smart kids went to Amherst or Harvard, right? And then the guys that were just 1 degree below went to UMass Amherst, where I went to school. So I could rub elbows with the Amherst guys, but I went to UMass Amherst for 4 years and studied legal studies there and sociology. And I had a professor who was a judge. I had a great academic and social experience at UMass Amherst. Great school, great instructors, great friends. I went to a reunion a couple weeks ago, but that was also where I had my first internships that were really critical, actually, in my career. One was working for the local sheriff's office in the House of Corrections. And I worked in a jail part time, working for $5.25 an hour to pay for my beer money, walking a tier at 19, but also great experience, right? Because I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. And then the year after that, I actually interned with the Mass State Police at their academy in New Braintree. And so without UMass, I wouldn't have had that ability to tap into some of those internships, which proved really favorable as building my CV as a young man to get to that next job. So it was
amazing how those things, you hit those events in your life that just change the direction you're going or shape. So you said you wanted to be in law enforcement. Did you have people in the family that were in law enforcement, or what was the
nobody in my family
chips?
was in law enforcement. My dad was first to go to college and actually went and became a pediatric dentist. My mother was a special ed teacher. So,
Wow.
so no, it's one of those things that for people from that world, we just love that sense of mission and helping people. And I thought that would be really fulfilling career. And I'm so glad as a young man, I understood that, recognized that.
So how did you get recruited into, or how did you get into the FBI? I'm always wondering how people go on
I'll
that
give you
journey.
one more funny story that I think is worth putting into the chronological order of this. So I actually was a rent-a-cop on Martha's Vineyard, and so at 21, and then they put me through the academy, and then I was eventually a full-time police officer in the town of Belmont, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, where I actually got to ride the motorcycles. There was a motorcycle cop there.
Nice.
But after 9/11, the Bureau, recognized that they needed to up their numbers, and did a big push. And every reading in the Boston Herald, they were looking for, men and women who could, who wanted that job. And so, being a former police officer or a police officer at the time was a big benefit. But actually, the biggest thing was I had also was starting to help the department do crime mapping, and I got some certificates through Microsoft on some of our systems. And so the Bureau saw me a little bit as a law enforcement person, and also someone who was looking at analytics, and it could also be around IT systems. Whether that's totally accurate or not, but that was their impression of me. And so I was fortunate to be hired. It took me 4 years to get through the process. It is brutal.
Wow.
If I failed my first interview, I'm always tell people that story. You always talk about failures, right?
Right.
And you get a chance, one more chance a year later, and I prepared as much as I could for that second, because I knew if I could get in the FBI, that would be really special. And you get polygraphed, you go through you have to run these fitness tests. It's just the experience of applying is a lot.
Wow. I didn't know the whole application. I told you a friend of mine, we were in the Army together. John Taylor ran the hostage rescue group over there. He's a helicopter pilot guy. It's the only other FBI guy I know. But so talk about growing up in the FBI. What's that career path like for those in our audience that have never been close to it?
Yeah, right. We look at movies and things, we think it's gonna be like
Right.
this. So I
What's it
went
really
into it
like?
thinking it was gonna be kind of like exciting 3x return on my excitement level, and kind of rewarding as a job. It was a 10x job. It exceeded all my expectations. Right from Quantico, you get experienced in all of these things in training, and by these amazing people who have done so much incredible work. And you really hit this accelerator button. I remember just being a young first office agent in Brevard County. It's a small town called Melbourne, Florida, right near Cape Canaveral. The space shuttle at the time was taking off. That was my first office. And you get basically handed these significant cases. It could be in a small office like that, could be terrorism, could be corruption, could be bank robbery. Every day was very different. But it was kind of running and gunning through these different cases, and they give you a ton of responsibility. I opened an undercover case within 6 months, very unusual for a new agent. And they give you a ton of resources and great expertise, but the stakes are real, right? And so when it comes to looking at terrorist subjects, the first 3 months of the job, I remember, wow, I couldn't really sleep because all suddenly you felt the pressure of on you of the American public. It's a few years after 9/11, we were still had a lot of concerns, and we wanted to make sure we got it right. And so it was awakening, but also I love that environment of the pressure environment. But it was amazing. Those early years, especially when you're working all these different things and you're learning about the agency.
Were you slotted already against like financial fraud, or were you doing general FBI field work? Like what's some of the early cases, if you can say?
Yeah, so I was not slotted as what we call a white collar agent. The term for me we're called knuckle draggers. So, maybe you have a smaller brand than the white collar guys, but in the early days, they don't try to really slot you as assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. But if you do well on whatever squad you're put on, if you really work hard and do well, you may hate the violation, but the idea is that they've hired people that no matter what it is, you're going to work really hard. And the other thing I should really mention is in the FBI, you have all these, quite exceptional people of careers prior working really hard, rowing in the same direction, not getting paid a lot of money, working an intense amount of hours. And And you don't find that a lot of places. When I got to the commercial side of my career, there was nothing like that. I missed that mission. And so I think that's also a really important thing to understand. You're working for the American people, you're protecting the Constitution. But I was not studying what collar. That came towards the last part of my career at the Bureau, in really what I would say in 2013 is where I started that phase. Happy to jump into that however you want.
Yeah, talk about that, moving from general being an agent into this white collar. Like, why did you get picked for that, and what was the transition like?
Well, it picked me in the sense that we were going through a government shutdown actually, and I was coming from a non-operational division at headquarters, congressional affairs, and I wanted to get back into operations. And they said, "Does anybody want to raise their hand?" I'm like, "Oh, I'll go." And you're going to the International Corruption Unit. So, well, I love working corruption. I love catching bad guys, and I hate corruption. I think it does so much damage to the world and to our country. In an international, I was assigned there without any choice and landed there and realized how complicated it is. All the evidence is overseas, all the bank records, all the interviews, everything is harder, right? And it requires an intense amount of detail work because you're looking at a lot of money flows, right? And so we would often get these massive subpoenas of bank records, but we would be also working with really good forensic accountants, financial analysts. I mean, it wasn't just me. I don't have a CPA. I'm not a forensic accountant, but it's always about following the money. And we hear this term all the time, but as I did that for my last 5 years, looking at these detailed records, and when I was in leadership and had a squad, I said, once you figure out how the money flows, you'll know what the case looks like, right? And that may take a long time, and that's hard. All these multiple accounts, multiple transactions, wire transfers, and assets being moved around and purchasing through shell companies. I love the complexity of it, but I also love that you could look at math and help you figure out through these credits and debits what the story was, right? Because no matter what that crime is, someone's got to get paid for it. And in this case, they had to take money out of publicly traded companies under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to pay for bribes, to win government contracts. And then the government officials who were taking the bribes would then buy yachts, who would be chasing these yachts around. They buy condos in Miami because they also had to launder the proceeds, right, for the sale gains. And it was amazing. I got to see the world. I was so blessed on the government dime and work with amazing people around the world and agencies. It was amazing.
So the international part, talk about that. I mean, I'm in kind of international. I mean, what did that look like? Was that Swiss banks? Was it Singapore?
Yeah, so it was everything, everything you talked about, but in a lot of stuff that you would not really think of initially. A lot of the time we're working with these foreign agencies that don't have near the resources or the investigative capability or training. And so we go in there and also help them with capacity building. So if a certain government needed assistance to do foreign bribery, because in the United States, we'd rather have a country govern itself with really good capabilities and training and people. And so the more we could do that, that was really encouraging. I love that part. Me, prosecutors and other investigative agencies, and that would include, everybody from, it could be Brazil, it could be the United Kingdom, it could be China, depending on the situation, Hong Kong. And we went all over, especially to countries where we were invited to participate. And one of the things that I take pride in is that we wanted to be more proactive. And so I would go to this OECD annual meeting on foreign bribery in Paris. And I would always be talking to prosecutors there. And they would say, look, if you could send me an agent for 6 months, we could do some great work. And so, light bulb goes off and we started detailing on temporary duty assignments, agents for 6 months to 12 months at a time to foreign agencies with their invitation to both work cases collectively. And that was a whole change in the way we did things. We were proactively looking for cases versus waiting for cases to come in because a company is self-reporting or a whistleblower. So it put companies on their heels, it put governments on their heels, and then people wanted to work with us more.
Interesting. So, at what point did you start working with outside like government contractors? That's our audience for the podcast for the most part. And how, over that course of 20 years in the FBI, how did you see the evolution of using outside contractors?
It really took off, every office we had contractors, whether they were forfeiture contractors. So those were people that were often former IRS agents, former DEA agents, former FBI agents that have a third, fourth career in government contracting. And they would be contracted under large government DOJ litigation support contracts to support the FBI's efforts in certain specific categories. And in the beginning, you weren't sure, as a new agent, you weren't sure how to interact or work with these people. But as I progressed through my professional career through the Bureau, finding those great contractors, it is such a great enhancement of your capability, because you get this awesome institutional knowledge. People have been doing it for 30, 40 years, and they just love the job, right? And they want to help. They still want to get back to that mission I was describing earlier. And so as I began to realize that was a thing, so to speak, I began to realize how to ask for money to get those capabilities. And then also, the Bureau is always struggling with getting technology because it's expensive and staying ahead of the bad guys. But just something like data analytics, the Bureau, think about all the data we collect at the FBI and across the international, the intelligence community, being able to analyze that data to make decisions, informed decisions, and to identify patterns of behaviors of bad actors and to be proactive. That was also an area that we didn't have in-house often. And so we could find contractors that do that. Critically important, especially with white collar and any big data issue. Contractors could hit the ground running. They had resources that we didn't have. They had access to platforms that we didn't have. And so towards the end of my career, I was like, oh, we got to get as many contractors as we could afford to enhance the teams. And that still plays out throughout government. And I don't think the country realizes, your audience realizes, how critical to every agency contractors are, what a big role they play and how much knowledge they bring and make us better, more efficient. And we don't lose institutional knowledge that goes out the door. It actually comes back.
It's kind of a different flow now, right? It used to be the government would put out requirements for technology, and now it's industry saying, here's the technology you could integrate in, because the government just can't keep up with the changes, particularly with AI and everything that's happening now.
It's a great point, Jake. I would say the market always leads, right? And so governments are always kind of, wait, you know how to connect the dots that way, with a few exceptions, especially to your point now. With AI agents, and the big data problems we're all dealing with, now more than ever, the government has to find ways to identify those technologies and how to contract those technologies and apply them in responsible ways. And it is more important now than ever. And I know that sounds like excited talk, but it's really true.
And we just had, you probably know him, Manoli Priyatonkus. I hope I'm saying his last name right. He was over at NIU. He'd been at DOE. He was on the podcast. I think it's coming out next week. So he's talking about it. So NIU have all the different agencies in there, and just the challenge of keeping up with all the technology that's happening now, and that having to rely on industry to set the pace instead of the old way used to be the government put out an RFP, everybody had to respond to it, but it's just, that's not going to work. And I think this administration is also very, very focused on relying on industry to set the pace.
Yeah, as we know, this administration has a lot of people from the commercial side involved in positions for the first time in government, right? And I think procurement especially needs to have tools to know how to ask and how to embrace and how to pay for technologies, products and services together. right? We need to get better at that. How so many times you'd hit, procurement and they're so busy, they can't possibly be imagining about, wow, if we only came up with a way to assess emerging technologies for our agency. I love what AFWorks has done for the Air Force. I think it's a heck of a model, and now you're starting to see other agencies have something similar, but AFWorks does it better than anybody else, in my opinion.
Interesting. Ren, before we go into the commercial side, I'm gonna go back to your career in the FBI. What's the highlight? What's the biggest case you had, the biggest win? What was the kind of the capstone of your career in the FBI?
Yeah. Again, Jake, great question. One of the things that I'm most proud of, I was always a team. I was never by myself, right? We do everything together. It's not like, oh, I did this, I did that. There's me and a couple of folks on this team that I got assigned to when the government closed in the National Corruption Unit, is that we had identified outside money to create 3 dedicated FBI teams of new positions, new FTE. We weren't robbing Peter to pay Paul. So it was great. We got to add 3 dedicated squads of almost 50 people, and we got to have really good handpicked people for those squads. It was all international, looking at international corruption, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, money laundering. We were also able to add really amazing forensic accountants. And even though there's a little bit of pushback on that, like, oh, the agents can do it. Well, the agents can't do everything. If a really good forensic accountant can help and agents do incredible things. And so be able to create those teams, I think we initially were given $9 million. And within 3 or 4 years, we had brought in, through penalties, disgorgements, and fines, upwards of $4 billion. And so you talk about return on investment. I'm so proud of those teams. Still exist. They continue to grow and do amazing things and go after really bad people around the world. And so being one of the early visionaries of the team that put that together, that's certainly my most proudest part. But just being a member of the FBI I feel very blessed and lucky.
I tell you, just our pre-talk to this, and for the audience, is you think of taking down terrorists as knocking down doors or tracking people down and espionage, following the money. And, that's almost any terrorist activity. Think of 9/11. It's all about who's funding, how it's being funded. And it's just a fascinating perspective on law enforcement to me.
Yeah. It sounds simple, but it's a great fundamental, true north. But then you got to find the bank accounts and then the hard work starts, but it always plays out. It doesn't matter what kind of case it is. It's a fundamental.
So what triggered you in transitioning out of government and going into private sector?
So I left after 12 years in the bureau, and like I said, I was a 10X. I loved my job. I was running great squads, amazing people I should be working for. But I realized that one of the things I just mentioned was building those teams, those specialized teams, and hitting the ground hard and kind of rethinking how we did things. I got so much satisfaction and reward out of that. I got recruited out early to help stand up an advisory practice and a federal practice for a company called Exiger.
Great company.
And
yeah.
I really thought, and when they came to me, this is a really interesting proposition.
So was it you got recruited out of government, or you'd already decided you're going to leave? Which was it?
Good question. I look back, I probably think I was open to ideas because I thought there were other ways to also do great work. And I think it just the timing was right. I liked the team. I liked what they were trying to do because they were in the financial crime space, and they had also some really great AI technology. And unbeknownst to them, we were going to jump into the federal space too. And so it worked out for me. And I'm so, again, lucky I got picked for that job. And then once you jump into that space, because I never worked for a company. I didn't have a commercial background. And within those 4 years as a managing director there, basically got, like an MBA on how to run a business, how to profit and loss, and how to do capture, and how to look at government contracts, how to assess, how to make money on contracts, how to do what do teaming agreements look like? Who do you partner with? And you got to do that with some amazing people. And we really, it was such it's also, as you know, to go out of your comfort zone. I knew how to operate around the bureau pretty well after 12 years. And jumping in the private sector was like, right in the deep end, and that's healthy, but it's hard.
What did you take from your time in the bureau that made you successful in just getting in industry? You had to hit the ground running in Exeter. What did you take from your experience in the bureau?
I mean, the big reason they brought me on, I should say, is I was an expert in this, in understanding money flows and international corruption and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and that was an area they wanted to build. But for me, it was kind of actually something we had talked about earlier before the podcast about if you get the right team together and you've got the right mission set, you can do just about anything within reason. And that mindset is, in the beginning, it's hard, it's rough. People are trying to figure that out. But once you get the cohesion and the goals and objectives get set and you put your mind to it and you're rowing in the same direction, and you get that sense of mission. It's never the same in the commercial side, but if you can get the right people to think that way, you can do amazing things. You can experience great growth and get into markets you never imagined. And I knew that's how I was successful, that team attitude in the bureau. And I knew it would work. It works differently. It navigates differently in the commercial side. But again, when you think about teamwork makes the dream work, I know it sounds cheesy, but I believe in that because it worked for me in the bureau and it worked for me at Exeter.
And so Brandon and his team have built fantastic capabilities and are really making a huge impact on the industry. But you've left. Now you're the CEO of two companies. Is that right?
Yeah, president of one and CEO of the other. But yeah, I'm an entrepreneur apparently.
I love it. That's why I got out of the Army. And I look back on it now, like I love the Army. I was a good officer, but man, if you're an entrepreneur, you got to move, you got to do stuff,
when I was talking to you before last week, I think, hearing your story, it's not the same, but some of the things drive entrepreneurs like us. But without government, I could have never done or be in this position to do what I'm doing now. And I'm helping government now. And so to your point, like you don't realize that you're an entrepreneur sometimes, but it's hard road, but it's for people like us, it's where we belong. And
how do you dual hat? You got Glacier 21, you got Fraud Optics. Talk about these businesses or what you're doing.
The way I think about it is I have two buckets: TrustStorm Solutions, which I'm president and I own 100% of, privately held company. So I have government contracts supporting DOJ with essentially complex financial crime, being them retired agents, retired forensic accountants, experts, right? Kind of the things we talked about earlier as a services business, but also bringing technology in into those discussions and leveraging that into cases wherever I can, because that's always goes back to, if I only had this technology, it would have been better. And so that's the thing about like investigations. I do that commercially as well for law firms and things like that, internal investigations or business intelligence. So that's what that world looks like in TrustStorm. And then 2.5 years ago now, Glacier 21, I started with a few other technical co-founders. And that's to look at using data to tackle illicit crypto activity, specifically around the digital private wallets. Everybody's on a different journey through crypto and through the blockchain. I really took the idea of big data, OSINT, if you will, and capturing that, and scraping that, and putting in identifying the right data and relationships and how that supports identifications around digital wallets that are often seen as private or are anonymous. And so both companies are about to take down the bad guys and about complex financial crime. Cryptocurrency is just the next thing. So it's actually seems like a logical next step, but Glacier 20 is a product company, a data company, whereas TrustStorm is a services company. And we know in the world of contracting, those are two very different animals, if you will. But when you can bring them together, when you great solutions and great people, that's where you can make a big impact. And so that's the world I live in, and every day is different. There's no knowing what it's going to look like.
So with cryptocurrency becoming so mainstream, right? And I think I'm not an expert at all in this. So, but with blockchain also, it's all about anonymity, lack of traceability, and as more people and even companies are holding assets in cryptocurrency, like what's the biggest risk? Where do you see the biggest risks?
Yeah, so you're right. The decentralized nature, the anonymous nature, even for people not looking to commit any crime, they're just libertarians or just want more privacy, or worry about the government controlling their money or their assets. There's lots of legitimate reasons. The risk is there has to be a compromise, right? Because you do need some level of regulation so that illicit activity can be stopped. And if you think about the example from like traditional financial crime, when I was at the FBI, we could subpoena a bank and get the bank transactions and the account numbers and people behind transactions that we identified. In cryptocurrency, the blockchain is beautifully, principally it's beautiful. You can see the movements of tokens and current cryptocurrencies and timestamps and volumes, but it's going to these anonymous wallets. And so the Achilles heel and the biggest risk is who are these players, and can we identify behavioral risk so that if you're a bank and you're taking custody, that you know that, hey, that wallet, maybe I don't know who owns that wallet, but I know the wallet is acting in a way that's probably high risk. So I don't want that in my ecosystem. And the same token, when you think about how that applies to the government, whether, through the illicit finance, now security lens, terrorism financing, as we've seen examples in cryptocurrency. And how do we identify people trying to raise money to hurt us, right? And how do they move money around to set up operations to hurt the United States and attack our allies? And so identifying those people and those behaviors for national security is also a critical area and a risk that we like to work on.
Is it a trend? Are the terrorists using more and more cryptocurrency to fund activities because of the anonymity?
Great question. More and more people are adopting crypto for legitimate reasons, which is sometimes surprising to people. But with that, even you see narco examples, right, where all cash smuggling is hard, but if you do it in cryptocurrency, it's a little more simple to get the money south, right, to the cartel. So that's an example. It's certainly, when you think about money laundering, it's just another avenue, a more technical avenue to help people do that. But overall, this is also shocking, Jake. Illicit activity, yes, you hear all the bad stories, but it's quite smaller than what we'd see in traditional finance as far as illicit activity. So legitimate adoption is growing so fast.
Percentage is flat.
Yeah. And yes, there are bad actors that are adopting it, but not as fast as legitimate adoption. And so, but these early days and stablecoins through the Genius Act, which just passed. So now you're going to have banks transacting, U.S. banks transacting in stablecoins under the Bank Secrecy Act. And so when you think about government, going back to the government world, they're going to need to know, it's going to change how you do SEC investigations. It's going to change CFTC investigations. It's going to change the intelligence and the law enforcement, capabilities within the U.S. government to identify and have experts who can trace that. And there's some great tracing companies out there, and in like the FBI and others are doing that. But the use of cryptocurrency in crimes that the government needs to understand is growing so fast. The government is having a hard time catching up with really good people to train in technologies. And so it's a critical thing that we're on top of this and that we can innovate from the US as well.
And so your company, Glacier 21, you told me about the background behind that name. You said it's not. I thought it was pretty cool. I've been thinking about it. So quickly tell the story behind Glacier 21.
So Glacier 21 is, we wanted something that didn't really kind of pigeonhole us into a certain area. So Glacier, the word glacier is not used by a lot of major products or companies. And so from an SEO, the way you optimize search in this world that we live in now, you want a word that's not that overused. And so Glacier, we found, was really a nice name. And you can talk about a glacier bringing in and destroying things and bringing in all sorts of attribution as it cuts through the land and flows through. But also 21 is a reference to 21 million, which in the crypto space is a reference to 21 million Bitcoin BTC, which is the most will ever be minted. And so in the crypto space, 21 is a pretty significant reference to the entire crypto system, but it's actually specifically to the 21 million minted BTC, which will never exceed that. And it's also kind of interesting. So Glacier 21, and we love this.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that till I talked to you. Very cool. So, what's going on now in the government contracting space around? Is this a growth area? Is this where you're seeing a lot more companies getting involved? And how is AI and all the technology stuff impacting the competitiveness and the scalability of the space in government contract?
Yeah, number one, I think companies that are in this space should not be afraid of technology. And I've seen this a couple of times where traditional services company would say, well, that technology means less billable hours. In some cases, it might, but the reality is you need to find a way to embrace that technology or that right platform. Otherwise, you will be left behind, and the government will cease to want to contract with you because you're not helping them with the harder problems, And so, don't be afraid of technology. Figure out how your services company embraces that technology to offer a differentiator to the government, right? And now you're seeing, even the last 2 years, you're seeing a lot more RFIs and RFPs, based on good RFI response, that are asking for sets of solutions or combined solutions. We recently replied to an RFP that was asking literally for really qualified people on the services side and some really great solutions on the technical side. And so, and we were fortunate enough to win that bid because we put together the right complement of technologies. And so, again, embrace it, and think you have to have a long-term thought on this, but AI is definitely not going where LLMs, large language models, are being embraced today and being introduced within requirements and mandates within some of the congressional requirements of government agencies to embrace AI for efficiencies in government, right? Government waste and abuse, AI can make things quite efficient when applied correctly. So think about that lens for a second. And then when you think about, I'm always thinking about cryptocurrency, of course, but the world of the blockchain is going to be so significant as you see all securities likely tokenized. Things like the NASDAQ will be like 24/7 where you can trade because it's tokenized. Think about what that looks like for the government. And then they think about, as we set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which we're doing in the United States, as a digital gold, right? What does that mean for the government? What does it mean when we're looking to identify assets to seize and forfeit in the digital space? Cryptocurrency, virtual assets, NFTs. How do we use the blockchain to identify those assets? These are the things that are coming in. And now with the stablecoin legislation, and the stablecoin is just a token that's actually attached to, 99% of them are attached to a US dollar. The stablecoins are going to be so used every day, both by government and by commercial. You need to understand how that impacts your business and how you take advantage of that. It's a reality. The growth numbers are staggering. They are real. It's not going away. And so this is a time to think about pivoting your business to find partnerships, right? Who is good at these things? Who within your sector you think might be, or do you need to go find new partners? Probably have to find some new partners. And how do you think about that solution? Because the way we're doing it 5 years ago and what we think about in 3 years is going to be 100% different.
Wow. So we're going to look ahead 3 years before. I want to ask, just because I think of things through the lens of talent. And this is such a fast changing. I mean, when you talk crypto 3-5 years ago, right? And AI was, it was out there, but it was very specialized. And now both of these are becoming ubiquitous. What are the talent challenges you see within the business and within this area of government contracting? And what's the solution to those kind of challenges?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Jake. You're the people that we think about from a talent standpoint, just taking the services business for a second. You need to have people and start thinking about hiring people who know how to work with different technologies. And so that may require retraining, right? Or looking for people that have experience with different solutions or systems, right? Who know how to apply that solution to whatever that problem set looks like. And so, and then people are very upset that, or worried, I should say, that AI is going to replace people. It's really going to make people rethink about how they use their skill sets and how they build their talents. Do they have to go back for some training or some school to get how to work with AI agents, or how to take that position and make that one person 3 times more effective? How do you do that? Well, if that person's working with the right technology, suddenly to an RFP or an RFI, you become kind of special. You start to look like a unicorn. Say, look, we know how to use these technologies. Our people know how to use these technologies. And we hear examples of how it applies to your problem set. Have you thought about putting this in your RFP? And these are the examples of the efficiencies. So however you get your talent, always be asking the question, what solutions do you work with? Tell me about a time when you've worked with technology. If those people that are critical for your team that don't have that skill set, how do you get them trained? How do you get them ready for that, right? And unfortunately, the people that are like, what, I'm never going to work with that, that's not your talent anymore.
Right.
It's just the reality of where this is going. And this is happening so fast. And now the government mandate is efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. We learned that, right, in the first few months of this administration. Prove to me efficiency, right?
So let's talk about the future. Let's talk about having everybody stake out some ground here. It's 2028. It's the end of the end of the calendar year. We're heading into the end of 2028. Probably heading into an election. What's going on in your area within the government contracting space? What does it look like from a technology, from a competition, from a policy perspective? What's happening around crypto fraud detection? This space where you're an expert.
It's going to be dynamic, and I know people right now feel like all these contracts have been canceled, and no one's winning new work. That's going to have to change. And I think that initial, what happened here initially with the administration, the reality is that's all about clearing, I think, the decks for kind of what we're prepared for next. And so in the next 3 years, if we look ahead, if we had that silver ball, we know that the government is going to have to push into these spaces around artificial intelligence and around cryptocurrencies and these efficiencies. Those discussions will only, I think, get stronger. But as we know, agencies are going to need help. And so I think where I say dynamic, it's going to be fast changing. In this space, it doesn't change every few years. It changes every 6 months. And so you have to stay on top of, if you choose technologies, choose the ones that, number one, are applicable to the clients that you work with now, applicable to the clients that you are in your capture in the future. And then you think about, okay, wait, what agencies are going to exist in the future? What are going to be gone? Everybody can guess. But the agencies that are able to do the more with less are going to be more successful and are going to be given more ability and risen up. I think you may even see consolidation, quite frankly, through that lens, and so.
So 2028, which agencies are getting the funding and running this area? Where do you see it? Because
I think Treasury and Commerce are going to be quite interesting, based on the administration's secretaries in those spaces, right? The men in those areas, and now their teams that they brought in, amazing men and women from the commercial side, have been given the remit to build out on the Treasury and build out on our ability to move faster in those areas, because I think the current administration, it's always about economic growth. And for that to happen at a rate that we can control and ensure that we're protected, but also be far outreaching, commerce and treasury have those responsibilities, I think is really quite important. The other obvious areas, I believe, are countering Chinese influence for sure, right? That's going to continue. That's going to be harder, as they are also have amazing AI capabilities. And it's not just China, any adversarial influence. And so it's the future is much more about data, right? And we know it's more about, from a DoD perspective, it's about drones and getting away from traditional militaries. And when you think about all of those things require AI, the best drones require AI. The best way to identify illicit finance requires levels of AI to make connections. And so that's why you're going to be seeing so much change, I think, in those areas. And I think those will be the juggernauts going forward. Of course, I think law enforcement intelligence community will be right on par, because they also play in those spaces and depend on those agencies as well for intel. And the way our adversaries are operating, our intelligence community as a whole is going to have to continue to stay really smart and try to get ahead every chance they get. And that's always about
follow the money.
That's technology.
Follow the money, right? Back to the original.
And spending money for the technology.
Right. Yeah, for
100%.
It ties back. So if I heard you saying correctly, you feel like a lot of the slow down, stop, the wipe, there's a move right now to kind of clear the table so we can reset it with a whole new approach. Is that what you're seeing within the government? A lot of people are saying, "Oh no, they're canceling. They're pulling back." But you're saying what they're really doing is clearing the table so they can reset the table.
You're already seeing some building already a little bit, in little fits and starts, right? There's going to be parts of the government, as we all know well, that have to work really well, and we're going to have to rethink them. And I think, by the way, your restart is how you do that is a whole nother discussion. But yeah, we need to reset, because the technology is forcing us to rethink everything, and it's happening faster than the internet, faster than smartphones, faster than electricity or the steam shovel. AI is making things happen so fast. And so if we don't and aren't wary of this, if we blink, then we're going to be behind. And we're already a little bit ahead. We need to stay on the back gas pedal. And so that's where I think
fascinating.
These 3 years are going to be critical. And that's why I say they're dynamic. And finding the right people to partner with and understanding how operators might look like, it's coming. Be ready for it.
Great. Fascinating. Just could talk for hours about this. I love your background, Ren, from the Chips to the Celtics to almost Amherst into the FBI, and now an impressive career in industry, leading 2 companies in an area that's certainly the tip of the spear of the importance of our national security, and a very important niche within our industry, within government contracting. So I wish you the best of luck. Look forward to watching your success, and probably need to bring you back in a year and just update this whole thing, because it's going to change a lot.
Yeah, Jake, thanks again for the opportunity. I love what you guys are doing and the way you're thinking about the space. You're a pioneer in the sense, right? We need to be thinking about these things and getting people, you're collectively talking about it. So thank you so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it. And good luck with your next ones.
Before I let you off the hook, I said I'm going to ask this, and everybody's getting it. Give me your one word about your gut feeling about kind of where the future of this space of government contracting.
It's going to be explosive, and I know that doesn't sound right to a lot of people, but the way this thing is going to take off, the way we're seeing it commercially, the way it applies to government contracting is hold on tight, find your path, and just dive hard, go hard at it, because it's going to happen quick. And if you're not positioned, you're going to miss the explosive opportunity that comes with this, with all the growth and opportunity. That's what's coming with this explosiveness. That it's here, and trust me, I'm not going to be wrong about that one.
For all of our investor friends out there, all the private equity guys, the VC guys, explosive is a good word to be watching out for. Ren, you're awesome. Hope to see you around DC. And thanks again. You're welcome back. And to our guest, thanks for tuning in to another, hopefully a fascinating episode of the future of GovCon. We got some great content coming out every week. Share it with your friends, like it, subscribe, all those things you're supposed to do. You know what you need to do. We're having a good time doing this, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so thanks for joining me on another episode of the Future of GovCon. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and some of the bold predictions. If you did, take a second, share it on your social media, subscribe on YouTube. If you have any ideas for future guests or topics you'd like to have covered, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always there. You can always learn more about precision talent solutions at pts.careers. Look forward to seeing you next week on our next episode.